Hi everyone. Hi, it is so nice to see you. Let's just check that we are. How are we looking? Are we on? All right, we're on. Welcome to our first reading of the year. Before we start, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. To acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Fernandino-Tatavian Band of Mission Indians, land upon which we live, work, and make art. We thank the ancestors for protecting this place, which to them was not property, but part of their sense of identity and community. This land was once viewed not as a thing from which to extract value, but a living entity into and onto which to invest meaning and human connections. The Tatavian people can be traced back 1,500 years in the San Fernando Valley, the Santa Clarita Valley, and the Antelope Valley. They are among the many Native American tribes that are not recognized by the federal government. So their continued survival defies the incredible limitations against them. This recognition, for which they have been asking for 150 years, is often denied to tribes whose ancestral lands have watersheds and water resources. If you noticed, I mentioned 3 valleys that were part of their ancestral territory. I also read today that there's, right near here in Placerita Canyon, there's gold, which is another reason this land was expropriated. In our first reading of the year, I am thrilled at the homecoming of Raquel Gutiérrez, a local hero. One of the great chroniclers and documentarians of Southern California, a poet and essayist, a recipient of a Warhol Foundation Arts Writing Grant, and recently a Rabkin Prize in Arts Journalism. They have long worked in the overlapping territories of art, performance, theater, and grassroots community political activism, with a deep investment not in the abstract, but in the concrete lives, bodies, and work of the Latinx diaspora and borderland. Raquel's new book, Brown Neown, is a fierce saga of queer punk fraternities and families and the decolonizing struggles of Latinx peoples in the secretive and sedimented territories of the Southwest. Like a butch Latinx Miss Marple, a gender nonconforming Ms. or Mr. Marple, Gutierrez persists in digging until circumstances, murders even, are brought to light. The land itself, the desert, the border wall, the water stations, and the towns and cities become the stage as much as the context for this, with a focus on land art, queer embodiment, and brown aesthetics. The sense of place I find here echoes Indigenous concepts of inhabited space, not sites of extraction, but of production, fertility, and beauty. To quote another great local hero writer, Miriam Gerba, Brown Neown is a work of Latinx mysticism. With beauty and unmistakable care for person and place, Raquel Gutierrez maps life's butchest, sweetest, and saddest memories. Well,
Thank you, Matias. So incredible to be here and to be, to see Matias's name in your inbox. It's a good day. So,
they see it all the time.
They're having very many good days in succession. So lucky yous. Thanks for the incredible conversation earlier today. The first year MFAs woot represent. So thank you so much. Just for your profound engagement with this work. It's truly humbling, and I think about what am I writing for? I'm like, yes, it's all of y'all, in the sense of just what does it mean to kind of chip away at our own sort of pathways towards language and languages that truly capture the range of experiences we're all bringing to the page, as well as language to truly capture just our awesomest, best, most passionate mistakes. Right? So thank you for being here. So thanks, Jackie. And thank you, David, for doing the tech. I'm reading the second essay in Brown Neown. Prompted always, if I had to go through life to be anywhere, right, the desert is always with me, so that is imprinted on me. And an opportunity to bring the great Jean Cordova into the space here. This is Jean Cordova in basically her desert bush phase, as she has already, turning a corner at 40, has passed the reins of her organizing and other activist work, right? At this point, the founding of the city of West Hollywood has transpired. And so this is a photo that Lynn Ballin, Jean's surviving partner, shares with me. As I got ready to go into my own sort of desert dwelling at 40. So essay 2, the first section of Llorando por tu amor. This is A Butch in the Desert. If you have a book, feel free to read along. A Butch in the Desert, 2016. 10 days into the new year, and Big Papa was gone. The last time I saw her, she was in a handsome silk slate blue bathrobe, watching CNN speculate on the 2016 election, still nearly a year out. That was 5 days ago. Big Papa had been on her side of the bed, smoking in her bedroom, inside a house in the beautiful Mediterranean-inspired Los Feliz hillside neighborhood, where she had always longed to live. She had been a nanny in her UCLA days for Quintana Roo Dunn, the adopted daughter of Joan Didion and John Gregory Dunn, perhaps the most read West Coast literary figures in the 20th century. The family lived in Los Feliz, and the couple were Big Papa's introduction to the life of the writer. The younger Cordova, seeing the way two writers could think and write interdependently, passing the hallway without speaking, their cigarettes on the verge of breaking ash. That is what she had always wanted. Today I can't help but fixate on whether or not Big Papa died, thinking Hillary Clinton would ease into office. She looked so strong the last time I saw her that I thought we would get another 2 or 3 months to confidently speculate on the future of the country, a future that didn't include her. I pushed the blankets away, my body an oven, and sat up in bed. It was an unusually chilly January morning in southeast Los Angeles, the sound of the barrio softly booming with banda, a sign of late Saturday night spilling into the early Sunday haze of hangover. The noise was layered by my phone vibrating with the news of her death. My neighbors would be heading to church soon, and I was still lying under several layers of mismatched blankets. The walls in my room were cold to the touch. I felt the blood rush to my head, my mouth dry, and my heart, of course, was pounding on the door of my chest. Oh, Jean. I looked at my phone and automatically dialed Sandy's number. Sandy was in Austin when I called, ending a conference weekend over a big brunch with a much-beloved mentor. She kept sending me voicemail. I spiraled into the mouth of new grief. I texted, Jean died, and she finally picked up. I'm so sorry, Gata. I hung up the phone. She did her best to comfort me from the noisy foyer of a hopping brunch spot in downtown. I wanted her words to soothe before the maelstrom of terrifying sadness came for me. She was who I had brought home to Big Papa, who had posed with Big Papa in a few photos I knew I had to snap. Big Papa, whose eyes instinctively sparked at being cradled by Sandy's ample femme curves, and now Big Papa was gone. All the blessings were starting to mix. On my behalf, Jean had loved Sandy, an accomplished, gorgeous Chicana femme with a beautiful mind to match. But Big Papa's words had been haunting me. Would I be on equal footing with Sandy in Big Papa's eyes? Was I stable and healthy enough to enter into an adult relationship with someone who had a career while I floundered on my mother's couch? Why was stable adulthood hard for me to inhabit? Could adulthood be legible in other ways? Big Papa had left this earthly plane, her body in pain, leaving me to figure out what it meant to be a grown butch on the precipice of 40. Would I ever make her proud? Before the cancer kept Big Papa bedridden, she and I would ride around town grabbing coffee, sitting around the park benches in Little Tokyo and shopping for boots and leather jackets, shooting the good shit between us, butch dad and butch son. Our identification with masculinity playfully threaded over language. Jean would never be my mom, nor I her daughter. Our butchness was so ingrained in our queer bodies that we read as ladies only to a world that didn't really matter to us, that couldn't read the magic in the code we spoke with flesh and blood. We were ladies when our food arrived, and guys when the check came. You're a good butch, Rockabebe. We can't lose any more good butches. Sandy and I kept going back and forth. It wasn't so much the fact that we started out as just another hot and heavy affair in the cliched romantic simulacra of our making. A science fiction hot enough to melt an ice cap, my body will always remember its first Tucson summer, hiding out with Sandy for 2 days in one of Tucson's oldest neighborhoods, Barrio Anita, an address marked 666, ours a desire fit for a beast. Sandy phoned me later that evening when she was back at her home in Tucson. I had just returned home from seeing Lynn, Big Papa's partner and now widow, as part of a large group of lesbians who had assembled in hopes of offering succor. We had gathered like the 12 disciples around Jean's lifeless body, which hadn't been moved from the bedroom yet, to offer a ceremonial circle, hands clasped to one another, to proffer her spirit with the lesbian pledge of love to who she was when she walked among us on earth. We were Dyke Vikings, sending her off with a pledge of devotion to her memories from that evening forward. As she moved to a Valhalla we knew to be peopled by other legends of lesbian activism. Losing Big Papa was huge, not just for me, but for the whole generation of lesbians who wouldn't have language or culture if it weren't for her. I thought about where Big Papa's soul would reside now. Would she be with Yolanda Redder now, her rival and friend, an important librarian and archivist of Latina lesbian letters who called herself the gadfly of the body politic? I identified with Redder, another cantankerous butch in love with every femme in West Hollywood, but too prudent and prideful to ever show a cracked vulnerability in her butch armor. Nobody could afford to be a tender queer in those days. When Yolanda died, Big Papa eulogized her proudly, underscoring Yolanda's work with the National Lesbian Feminist Organization and her numerous other contributions to the One Archives at the University of Southern California and to the June Mazer Lesbian Archives in West Hollywood, as well as more personal and eccentric talents. Yolanda was a carpenter and an airplane mechanic who bought and sold rare books. Yolanda, using her gruff exterior to benefit the nascent lesbian community coming together in public for the first time in the 1973 West Coast Lesbian Conference, often directed security efforts as a chief monitor for community events. She was security coordinator for the People of Color contingent for the first Lesbian and Gay March on Washington in 1979. She directed more security at the Los Angeles Dyke March in Sunset Junction, when the street festival was free and young Latinx families lived in Silver Lake. And Yolanda had, according to Big Papa and Lynn, a knack for writing 70s era button slogans in her own way dissed and honored lesbian gender. One sister's butch is another sister's femme. You've just been served by a lesbian. And marimacha ike. A lesbian separatist through and through, Yolanda once stepped in the threshold of a lesbian gathering at a Chicana Studies conference to ensure that no men, cis or trans, would be allowed to enter. Even Sandy could attest to that moment, as she had been a young graduate student aghast at Yolanda's separatist tactics. Eager to inhabit the moniker Yolanda the Terrible, she and Big Papa once got into a fistfight over a femme that they both had dated. I heard Yolanda swung first. In bed again, staring up at the ceiling, phone in my hand, I had also broken the news to Sandy that David Bowie died on the same day as Big Papa. We were both bewildered at the level of loss that day. The queerness of it all, two huge figures passing hours from one another, figures who bookended two important histories that buoyed the likes of Sandy and me. Two queers at odds with the distinct worlds we were born into, and who, with 8 years between us, could still find common ground in our losses. She hadn't learned of Bowie's death because she was mid-flight from Texas back to Minneapolis, where she now lived. That move made our being together harder, as she was now thousands of miles farther away from me than the mere 500 between Los Angeles and Tucson. Just when I started to feel like we could bridge our differences, the physical gap between us widened. Sandy coaxed me out. I wanted to belong to her, give her my body, my secrets, secrets that lived in well-hidden places, like the sky in Tucson that passed for the ocean when I was missing home. No one I was intimate with had ever thought to look up into the various constellations of shame that shadowed the life I was trying out for myself, or to look down and see the mosaic pieces of my broken heart, a crushed ruby hidden within the rubble of the gravel in the wash near her house. But she knew where to look, how to dig, pick up a shard, and let the light shine right through it. She was a good reader, a close reader, an interpreter of the ways in which my upbringing became the source of pain that brought me to poetry. And my poetry was what brought her to me. I could have been an archival text, the way she studied my opaque marginalia with the intense monastic discipline I have admired in most scholars. She cracked my code. Sandy opened me so far wide, I wasn't certain I was capable of closing myself back up again, a safety tactic I had somehow unlearned in her presence. I read Eve Sedgwick's A Dialogue on Love when I found out it was Sandy's favorite, a book about how Sedgwick, a well-known queer theorist, begins a post-cancer therapy session but doesn't want to fall into providing prosaic responses that help explain away her depression, her anxiety, her codependencies. I thought about the cancer regimen I had been spared and the cancer diagnoses Big Papa had received over the years, the cancer that had finally stuck. I read the multitude of ways Sedgwick considers her therapist a love object and produces lyric poetry and haikus that obscure the wild constellation of neuroses she carries. Reading it was somehow sublime, yet still pessimistic. I felt myself getting sick. The last chapter of the book placed me firmly into my own depression about Sandy. It wasn't like we didn't have a shot at fully being together. Sure, we came from different worlds with distinct categorical markers, only to come together to create more distinct categorical markers about ourselves. I was raised by Mexican and Salvadoran immigrants in Southeast Los Angeles. She was a Tejana red diaper baby. 4 generations earlier, the border crossed them, not the other way around. We were trying to reconstitute ourselves as a brown butch femme couple while riding the wave of fixity that these identity categories proffered. We indulge in the romance assigned to 2 queers who long to enjoy a gendered butch femme dynamic that emerged in surprising ways. The red in her fingernail polish, the dirt on my Red Wings. It was a gender binary we kept alive in our private, intimate spheres. We were the on our back centerfold that never happened. We had difficult childhoods, difficult parents, and we turned to various forms of nerddom to escape these soft prisons. We left our white partners for each other. We were just like any other couple vying for happiness, despite the odds. In the days and weeks after Big Papa died at home, Lynn, newly widowed, along with any number of close friends, and I would gather around the large wooden dining room table in revolving door visits to sift through photographs, articles, papers, and online tributes to the life of Jean Cordova. One image that easily caught my eye was a lesbian newspaper clipping of Big Papa sitting in lotus position, a big smile on her face, and a thin bohemian leather headband poking under her fallen pompadour. "What is this?" I exclaimed, like I just panned for gold. "Oh, that." Lynn looked up and slowly smiled. "You know, Rock, this was at the start of Jean's desert period. She had just sold the business and went on a bit of a vision quest. Is this what Jean looked like when you 2 met?" I knew Jean and Lynn had met, as in all great love stories, at a lesbian support group in West Hollywood. Jean had just turned 40 and was looking to start the next great chapter of an already storied life. I had heard many of these stories over the last few years as Big Papa sat me down many times over, many times over Diet cream sodas and menthol 100s, and narrated the ways the lesbian and gay movement had both thrilled and exhausted her. Jean was the first at most everything where West Coast lesbian history is concerned. She helped co-found the city of West Hollywood, a bastion of protection for the nascent lesbian and gay community of Los Angeles. She was a delegate for a National Gay and Lesbian Caucus at the 1980 Democratic National Convention, holding up a sign on the floor that said, "Lesbian Democrat." But as she neared her 40th year and saw all the ways the movement was moving right along, with new blood coming to tend the outgrowth from the seeds of change she had helped to plant in the early 70s, it made sense for her to interrogate her truer callings. New trails were what Big Papa loved to blaze. I just didn't know that the desert had figured so prominently. Jean loved the desert. When we first started courting, we would road trip through the Southwest, camping here, really roughing it some nights in Jean's old Dodge pickup. Lynn's voice would quiver, but she looked up like she was seeing the film strip of memory unfold over our heads. I poured her a glass of water from the pitcher on the table, careful not to sully any of the precious materials filled with important Big Papa history. And Jean really knew how to live. She'd say, "Lovey, how about we go to a hotel, get a hot shower, and then go antique shopping in Santa Fe?" The room erupted in ahs and whoops at the gallantry that was Jean. Jean loved the desert. We lived in Gamma Gulch for a few years before moving to Todos Santos. In fact, that's where she wants her ashes to be scattered. Gamma Gulch is a neighborhood, or what passes for one in the exteriors of Yucca Valley, California. Yucca Valley. It is located next to the unincorporated community of Pioneer Town in the Morongo Basin region of San Bernardino County's high desert. The historical town was originally incorporated in 1946, co-founded by actors Russell Hayden and Dick Curtis, who had first discovered the parts just west of Yucca Valley while exploring on horseback a small swath of land nearby what Curtis had bought for filming Wild West flicks of the era. Other investor partners included Roy Rogers and Gene Autry, entertainers who brought their aw shucks wholesome cowboy acts out west to Hollywood. The winding 4-mile drive northwest of Pioneer Town from Yucca Valley has been designated a California Scenic Drive, a place where people go as a means to escape their lives, where you go to fake your death, forget lovers, hide the body, or conquer whatever monkey's clutching to your back. Today, the here of Yucca Valley and its more popular older sister, the town of Joshua Tree, is a here of the government shutdown's impact on these small, sparsely populated, high desert towns in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. People have come into the Joshua Tree National Park to steal or to face the largest of the yuccas, which grow only in the Mojave Desert. The Mojave yucca plant and the Joshua Tree are the iconic fauna of the region, flora of the region, symbols of sun-soaked hardiness, my editor, sun-soaked hardiness that proliferate every winter onto the IG timelines of our collective existence. They are sites of lesbian weddings for the witchy ilk who couldn't imagine finding the goddess in Palm Springs. It's where Gen X slackers came to pioneer Airbnb properties, ushering in an era of celebrity recreational occupation of these lands. Joshua trees are California icons alongside the redwood and are the kind of species anticipatorily grieved as the climate crisis continues to improvise its terror on the hottest pockets of the Southwest desert. The desert blooms of recent years have turned heads eastward to places like Anza Borrego Desert State Park, whose 2018 super bloom was particularly stunning in a year that saw an uncharacteristically heavy rainy season. And of course, for the last 2 decades, the Coachella Valley Music Festival has been forging relationships between millennials and Gen Z music lovers and aspirant hipsters in the desert. We didn't have Instagram in 2002, the year I saw Bjork at Coachella. I was a 25-year-old weirdo who stumbled into the desert oasis without any articulated hopes of capturing the most magical of magic hours. What was a selfie to a digital immigrant? When Jean and Lynn lived in their part of the high desert, on the end of a bumpy dirt road in Gamma Gulch, Yucca Valley and Joshua Tree were in the midst of a desert renaissance. Imagine these two lovers clutching one another tenderly, their eyes adjusting to the dark purity of those desert night skies, teeming with stars. The kind made impossible in Los Angeles. The early 90s were a golden era of sorts for the music and art centered around Pappy and Harriet's, an old biker bar that catered to the motorcycle outlaw set of the 70s who roamed the highways surrounding the high desert. Serving some of the best barbecue outside of Texas, Pappy and Harriet's of the late 80s also served not only bikers, but also the rough mix of locals, artists, Los Angeles Nouveau Riche, off-duty Marines from 29 Palms, cowboys, and more hipsters, barely surviving the winding 5-mile stretch of Death Wish roads that branch through the valley. On any given night, you could chain smoke under the Perseid meteor shower as you grooved to Victoria Williams, or rocked out to Queens of the Stone Age while Ed Ruscha pontificated over kale salad just a few tables away. Or you could catch Jean in light denim shorts and a dusty Stetson, Texas two-stepping with her new girlfriend Lynn, the cute ginger with the South African accent who had never dated the butch before. Lesbian lovebirds nesting in the desert, blending in with the other self-imposed, exiled weirdos. What do you think? Should I stop there, Matthias?
26 years.
More.
Is there a little more?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. There's a lot more. Happy to read. All right. All right. Nobody dig it.
Reading
I had gotten laid off from a good arts administrator job in San Francisco when Sandy and I first started communicating. I was a community arts curator, which sounded so meaningful, as if the practice had somehow been more than just processing contracts and ordering catering and staving off the potential takeover of our new tech industry warlords. Within the organization, middle managers battled to choose the artists and themes that would bring to fruition projects happening, small exhibitions, and public programs for a San Francisco demographic that was becoming more and more homogenous. It was bureaucratic violence meting out death by 1,000 meetings that all should have been emails, or in nonprofit parlance, organizational restructuring. Just as communities of color found themselves struggling to maintain their homes in a changing San Francisco culture, I suddenly found myself without a business card identity to buoy me. My self-esteem was imperiled, and so of course, when Sandy made a series of butch femme-specific social media posts, I would post the occasional flirtatious comment. I thought I had some authoritative experience as someone who weirdly tethers herself to such a blatant label, a categorical marker to ensure my waning visibility. All the back and forth on social media finally leveled up into direct message territory. I toyed with Sandy and sent her photos of me doing my best impressions of Cesar Rosas, lead guitarist for Los Lobos, since we both had pockmarked chubby cheeks, wore wayfarers, and had an explicable cucumber coolness that read Puro Suavecito. She then purchased every chapbook I was selling through my tiny press. A few weeks of radio silence, and then she wrote that my poetry had fucked her up. I read her message after returning from a weekend of camping in the East Bay with my white girlfriend and all of her queer white friends. She said I seemed capable. We were both in committed monogamous relationships with white women who cared deeply about us. Yet it was precisely that relational configuration that enabled Sandy and me to offer each other shelter. There's something to be said about the comfort of recognition that comes from a lover or friend who looks like you, or at least looks at you like you are family, like there's a familiarity in the ways you have both suffered. To find a lover who has been in the same position in the power structures that dictate our ontologies. We saw the other's pain of misrecognition, such deep howling pain about how our lives had escaped us, how we followed the trail of aspiration, stability, and still felt stuck. After 6 weeks of messaging each other, we agreed to meet in Los Angeles. I came from the Bay Area and she the Southwest. It was one night that became a week. I was chasing a high. In between marathon lovemaking sessions that left me sweating, I gulped down copious amounts of French spring water, like I had just conquered the Tour de France of fisting. And chasing the high got expensive. I racked up credit card debts, paying for flights and week-long Airbnb stays in my city and hers. I was trying to prove to Sandy that I, a brown nonprofit class butch, would wine and dine her in the only way available to me. Lynn had put out a call to the inner circle for help. I came over on a warm Southern California evening to relieve her of overnight care for Big Papa. This was when the height of the cancer revealed itself in the roughest soul-shaking coughs that racked Big Papa's thinning body for the rest of her days with us. Lynn was losing sleep on top of the mounting grief she was depositing in her emotional bank, and I was content to split my time catching a few winks on their leather couch in the living room with an alarm set to wake me every 2 hours to give Big Papa her pills. It was midnight, which meant I hadn't even thought about sleeping, let alone felt the tug into slumber. But it was time to get Big Papa's first round of medication from 4 separate snap-capped vials. A booming locomotive in the other room startled me to sit up suddenly. "Big Papa?" I whispered gently, hoping not to startle her, but Big Papa was in deep slumber. "Big Papa, it's time to take your pills." Big Papa stirred slowly, her eyelids fluttering open. "Can you help me sit up?" I pulled the blankets down slowly and felt the heat rise. I touched Big Papa's bony shoulder and soft back and felt her long-sleeved pajama shirt soaked with sweat. "Which drawers do you keep your pajamas in?" I walked over to the tall boy dresser in the room and pulled out a new pajama top. I turned on the lamp, sat on the edge of the bed, and gestured for Big Papa to raise her arms over her head. I peeled off her nightshirt, her back hunched down, chest concave, and ran a dry washcloth to her underarms and shoulders. I quickly got her clean pajama top on to save her from catching cold, but also to preserve her butch dignity. "How's that? Better, yes? I have to pee now." "Yep, I got you." My body tensed up at the solicitation of a new intimacy, but I quickly let that pass through my body and assured Big Papa that I wouldn't let her down. I took a deep breath as I bent at the knees and wrapped one arm around Big Papa's lower back and put her arm around my shoulder. I slowly walked us through the night-lit hallway and turned on the lights in the bathroom. I lifted the toilet seat and helped Big Papa pull her pajama pants down and then sat her on the toilet seat. She looked at me and smiled weakly, though still mischievously, as if to say, "Can you believe this shit?" And I think I'll leave there. Thank you so much. That was good for me to read.
May I ask a formal question?
Yes.
So one thing I noticed, and it became apparent while you were reading it, like with your voice, is this sort of delicate balance between different eras, if you will. Especially it became very relevant to me tonight that you mix in modern day sort of social media specific nuance into this in a very organic way. And so I was just wondering if you would be willing to speak on the balance of how to do that in a way that doesn't, like, I feel like a lot of modern writing still fails to capture sort of the zeitgeist and the voice. So.
Thank you. Tell me your name again.
Roland.
Roland, awesome. So form in terms of the way in which the gestures toward social media are kind of folded into some of the passages. And so, are you asking like why do I do that, or how do I do that?
I guess it's like, how do you maintain it while still making it feel like natural to the rest of the voice? Because I feel like a lot of the times when I hear that, it's a bit yeah, it's a bit disjointed.
It's a bit what?
I feel like when I hear it in other media, a lot of the times it's a bit disjointed, but here it
Disjointed.
still felt part of like the organic whole.
Sure. Well, I think for bringing social media onto the page as a way to talk about the way that at least I have experienced representations of the desert. And so, especially in this this interesting sort of it was, you also have to consider that I guess for the lack of better, just because it's a particular moment in time, the Trump era, right? So 2016, 2020, and in Southern California, and the way that I think my generation, in some ways, trying to remain faithful to the sort of the conventions of the genre of social media, and by way of the hashtag, right? And the way that the hashtag sort of functioned as like, oh, you want to see more desert bloom photos?
Yeah.
You want to see more great desert bloom of 2018 photos? Like here's like the particular rabbit hole you can fall down into. through that sort of signaling, right? Flagging in some way. And so that felt important to me to talk about, just because I feel like that was something that ignited an interest into these, hinterlands, right? That I know that when I was, I went to the first Coachella, but it never occurred to me that I was in the desert, and only now living in Tucson do I sort of revisit these moments of like, oh man, I remember, and I wrote about this for an essay in High Country News about, last year I broke down in Blythe with my dying dog, like, because I have cancer, and it was like already like 8 a.m. and it was 106 degrees. And I was just like, what am I gonna do? My dog is wearing a diaper. And that reminded me of like, oh gosh, I remember when my dad, when we came back from like Lake Havasu, and we broke down in Needles, and my dad was just like so hungover, and just like, we were just desperate. And I was like 5 or 6, and saw him get on the back of a motorcycle, these two, like straight out of, what is that Peter Fonda movie? What is that Peter Fonda?
Easy Rider?
Easy Rider, yeah. Straight out of Easy Rider, and our dad just like going with these 2 white guys, and we're like, we're never gonna see him again. They're gonna go figure out somewhere, kill him, and whatever, Anyway, so, but anyway, so I just wanted to kind of find ways to bring onto the page the way that these interests into representations of the desert or experiential, uniquely experiential or whatnot, right? I don't know if I'm answering your question. Okay, thanks, Bill. Yes. Hey, Auntie.
Thanks. They don't know me by that name, so that's my nickname. No, it's okay. I would love to hear you talk more about queer kinship and queer genealogy. It's something I'm really interested in, and I love the way you represent it, and both the way that there's this, the intimacy of your relationship with Jean as a parent-child relationship,
Yeah.
and then the way by archiving her life and like her loves, that you're also offering her up to a whole new generation of readers as like a queer ancestor and this person in genealogy. So I know that's important to you. I'd love to hear more thoughts about it. And then I also have just sort of specific question. I don't know if you even know the answer, but did Jean have a queer papa, a butch dad?
Oh, yeah.
And
Yes.
did she talk about that?
Yeah.
And then also, how do you think about, like, are you thinking about a sort of parental role, or what's your relationship to
Sure.
an intergenerational continuance?
Yeah, so let's see. My first encounter with Jean was through a performance project that I had for about a decade with first 3 and then 2 other Chicana Butch dykes, one of whom, Javier Rodriguez, is an alumnus from here, and we did a project called Bushvales of Banachlilan. It was just kind of multimedia, very slapdash, but smart, in the sense that what we lacked in theater training, we made up for in writing. And it was about, sort of performing just sort of the lost lores of Butch histories in our lesser Los Angeles, East Los Angeles, Southeast Los Angeles, and thereabouts. And we made work focused on 90-year-old Nancy Valverde, who had a very just powerful, tumultuous, storied life. She's still alive. She's still with us. The family was originally from Deming, New Mexico, and came to Boyle Heights and Lincoln Heights in the 40s. My mom's born in 41, so my mom's 81. So, and Nancy's 90, and then just kind of dropped out of school. Just like started working as a child, and like by the time she was like 15, was already exhibiting just like masculine tendencies, but also working in underground economies. Right, she was driving and bodyguarding sex workers in the neighborhood, and I was getting arrested for masquerading, and in her 20s she would end up in Civil Brand Institute, the correctional facility for women in City Terrace. It only closed down because of the '94 Northridge earthquake, but there were 4 different sort of maximum and space areas, and the daddy tank was considered just the roughest, the worst of the max security, and she was often in the daddy tank. That's where they separated all the bulldaggers and studs, and so Jean was working in the Los Angeles Free Press, and then worked for the Lesbian Tide, and would cover issues around just like women prisoners and the cruelty of the daddy tank. And so she knew Nancy Belvedere, her story. I was really taken with our just efforts to bring that story into more sort of popular understanding locally within like our sort of the community that we performed for. And so I remember she came up to us at one of our performances at one of the Mazer archive events, and myself and Mari Garcia and Claudia Rodriguez, we're all just like in whatever their store suits, we're doing our performances. And she comes up to us and she says to Claudia, no, she says to me, "You remind me of me." And then she tells Claudia, but you look like me. Because Jean Cordova was very like good looking, like still very handsome, like just died a handsome butch. But like when she was younger, she was just like a knockout. Basically saying like Claudia was the good looking one. But like my personality and like sort of go-getterness, that's what Jean was.
I managed to insult both of you.
Well, no. Well, maybe, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, so in the way that like older queers, right, are off-putting to younger queers, trans people, and these, right? So I'm just kind of like, oh, damn. But also totally charmed, right? Because like, if anything, Jean Cordova, le sobraba, just that charm, just like, damn, you had to do like begging, right? Begging means just like, what does begging mean? Begging, right? Begging.
Hit? No.
No, like you're like begging, like stickiness, right? They're just like so charismatic. They're just like people stick to them.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like was just like Jean and Lynn had just come back from living like almost a decade in Todos Santos. Like after the desert life, they moved down to tippy tip of Baja California, Todos Santos, before Todos Santos has become Todos Santos. And they lived there, just kind of living that lesbian expat life, living the life. Because Jean had sold her business, right? Like the business that had made her money, she ran the gay Yellow Pages, which was a business, right? This need for this business for lawyers and plumbers and doctors and all the things to know that like those services were available and everything was all chill and safe and you could do that. And so she sold that business and they moved down to Mexico and basically started writing, right? Started trying to think of their next sort of their next move into a writing life. And from there, and they left after founding a school for girls in Todos Santos. They came back to they came up to Altadena and started, trying to see like, oh, what's the organizing scene like now? Like, what's the community? What's everybody doing? What are the kids doing? And so that was really, it was really powerful. And she came up here basically to write and top off with her memoir, When We Were Outlaws. And for her book party, When We Were Outlaws, she wanted to do like stage a scene from the book and cast me as like the young Cordova. That was super fun. And we performed at one of those theaters in West Hollywood. Gosh, I can't remember, but it was like it was not just a black box theater. It was like a nice little production, but that she bankrolled. And so for me, I think, yeah, I mean, I'm in my mid-40s, and I feel like, I think that's the tendency, the impulse is like, if you're an educator, right, you're going to, of course, want to exist in relationship to younger people because they're on the ground, right? And I have so much to learn from, I do learn so much from next generation. And then Tucson is really particularly special because the young people that Tucson attracts are the young people that want to work in intense humanitarian efforts, right? No More Deaths is an organization that does desert aid and bringing water and supplies and medical attention to people who are in kind of the most dangerous parts of the desert, trying to get to safety to the U.S. And so you see, really like, it's interesting. It's like, I'm like, oh, okay, you look like you're straight out of Oakland, straight out of Brooklyn, straight out of Portland, but you're here, and you've decided to leave those places and come here to do this work. And so, I'm super excited. I have friends who I'm just like, I don't know, what are my questions, right? Like, it's mostly about just like, okay, well, like, what are you excited about? So, and yeah, I'm teaching a queer trans writing memoir writing class out of my house.
Mhm.
And I just posted, I'm like, all right, let me just see like who's out there who wants to just like kind of rap and write. And one of my former students is just like in the class. I'm just like, oh, no, now I get to, in a sense, level the field of engagement outside of just like whatever the classroom. So, yeah, I hope that's,
Yeah.
does that suffice?
Yes, thank you.
I have a question about toughness and tenderness.
Mhm.
You said, earlier on, you said you were thinking about early dyke days. No one could afford to be tender.
A tender queer.
A tender queer.
Mhm.
And there's a whole narrative of sort of toughness being taught, right?
Mhm.
But also tenderness being practiced, right?
For sure, yeah.
Like those two things aren't really opposites. That they fold together really, really beautifully, neatly. And two other like similar terms that you used. You talked about the fixity of gender categories, right? Of being seen, when you and Big Papa went out for dinner, right? Being seen, being ladies when you got the food and guys when you got the check. But that fixity and fluidity and toughness and tenderness, right? These sort of beautiful terms that you mobilize.
The four directions.
Yeah, the four directions of the compass.
Yeah.
So where, like, have you always thought with those things? Are these specific to the? I mean, do those categories exceed what you read? Are they things that you think about?
For sure, I think those have been, in some ways, things to respond to, modes, or at least like ontologies that have been modeled to me from different sort of generational subject positions. Tyrannies, sorry, yeah, anyway. Try not to say or right when I speak, so I don't lead the audience to my point of view. And because I think there are certain ways in which the butchness and queer masculinities have been represented, and that the spectrum of representation is just feels like it's only widening now, or that widening has only become available to us now because of the technologies that make just the world smaller, right? And things and our search terms more specific. And so and the way butchness has become again an opportunity for the spectrum of gradation to exist, right? So butch is often a category that is issued, right, for other more ample possibilities. And you know, in the book, this is so this book is an homage to Jean Cordova and a way in which the anxiety of butchness sort of going away, but the way in which that fear of its loss is also for me, and I hope in some ways that it's the takeaway of readers is that, you know, it's conflating with her own sort of reckoning with her death. It's coming for her, and she's scared that all this identity that she fought so hard to embody and inhabit will go the way of Hillary Clinton, you know. And it's not her. I don't know. I mean, I think there's also these impulses in the sense like when people say like, oh, there's the tension or the difference between butchness and transness. I'm just like, butch is trans, you know.
Yeah.
Trans is the wellspring, right? Like of butchness in some ways, or in the way in which we can. It's language.
Since we're maybe wrapping up after a long day, what are you doing? What are you working on now?
Oh.
What's next?
Did my agent put you up to that? What is next? Oh, you know,
Going next door for a drink.
next, oh, I had this lamp, so IKEA.
What do you feel like doing?
No, what's next is, it's interesting too, because, you know, you write like, something that passes for a book, right? And it is a very solitary act. You kind of do need to just sort of lock out all the distractions and people, and kind of lock yourself away from people for a while. And so now the book is out, and I kind of want to conviviality, you know? I'd like to be convivial, and this book, I'm like, please, can we wait to put it out? I don't want to put it out during the candy. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, great, because I would like to be with people and party. And you know, I did that, and I got COVID, and you know. But in terms of what's next, I want to write a novel because this was a lot of work, and research sucks, and I just want to laugh my ass off. And research is great, it's amazing, but I had the resources to do it. Like when you win those awards, honey, time, that's powerful. And so if somebody gives me more money, then I will do some researching nonfiction, writing it, I mean. And for now, I just want to write a novel and, yeah, maybe a thriller. And get that money.
Like a spin-off from Brown Neown. This is like push lesbians on the run.
Or like Blythe Motel.
Murder
In a Blythe Motel. Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, because you read the passage with the ruby, I'm going to ask about the ruby because I noticed that in Person Another, the poem, the ruby appears again, and so I just wondered if there was anything to that.
The Ruby and the Rebel. Close reading, thank you. You know, that was an image, that's an Asher Hartman chakra reading image, and one of those things that just like a cute little prism from one of my personal chakras into a poem and into the prose. So, yeah, Dakota ring.
I know that you spoke a lot about like the music scene in your book. I was wondering if you've ever tried to enter it as a lyricist or...
As a lyricist? No, I was always the musician, and I I play guitar and I play drums. Yes. If you follow me on Instagram, there's a great video of me playing drums when I was 21. And my friend Martin Sorrendegui, who is a singer of Los Crudos and the Brist, he sent me one like random night when I was feeling better about myself. And I see the video and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe I had such low confidence because I am like so good at drums in this video. And I felt like I was always, I wanted to be a musician, and my high school best friend, I'm gonna see who lives in Ann Arbor this week. I'm very excited. Bad moms. Was a really beautiful singer and a great lyricist, and so that was her role. But I don't know. In Tucson, they have this incredible fundraiser every year on Valentine's Day for queer trans detainees at the Eloy Detention Center. It's called Cover Band Show. And so everybody in town puts together these bands that cover, other bands. And my friend who is like my, my millennial friend, young millennial friend, or maybe an old Gen Z friend. Anyway, I want to do a band, right? And do my cover band's gonna be Kate Butch. And I'm trying to figure out like who can be. I think I have a few musicians in mind, but I definitely want to sing in Kate Butch. So, but I mean, I don't know. I'm listening to the new March Volta, and I'm like, I consider flute for me, and that's great. That dude is like so underappreciated. He's El Paso, Southwest. And tell me your name again?
Nico.
Nico?
Yeah.
All right,
What did Gene, and you can answer this too with your own thoughts, think of today's 2020 and late 2010s LGBT organization and direction that they're moving in?
Yeah, Gene really tried to get me situated with like the Lambda literary situation of that era, and then I was like, I can't. This is too gay, white male centric, no pedo, and but then she was very, organized democratic politics, right? She was just very like election, She I would say she was more progressive than liberal, and I think at the time when she was alive and of that ilk, I just I couldn't relate. I couldn't relate. I feel like there was a sort of our disconnect around just like grassroots politics and sort of more establishment politics. So. That's, I think, sort of, just kind of your sort of classic generational tension. But in terms of other organizations, I mean, she was a foremother, a foreparent, somebody who was just kind of like, people came to her for a blessing, So it's interesting. I mean, she had a lot of power.
One more.
Sure. Roland.
I've already gone, so.
No worries.
Last week in class, when discussing Brown Neown, we talked about this sort of conversation between loss, the anticipation of loss, and also nostalgia. Would you have any words on that by chance?
Sure. Let's see. That's quite a triangle, right? And so, I think in this space, right, we're all sort of expected and encouraged to resist the nostalgic turn. Is that true? I was just guessing. It's kind of true, right?
Yeah. Be critic, question it at least.
Yeah.
For sure. And it's good to question it, right? Toxic nostalgia, that's the whole MAGA situation, right?
Yeah.
And so I think in the Beyond the Border Wall Prototypes essay, that sort of moment, the thing that passes for my 90s nostalgia in the scene at the wedding in San Diego, which is, it's a scene that I wrote for the book. And that essay appears in one version on a website called Popula that I think you can still find it. And it's a weird it's a really powerful platform in the sense that it attracts like really great writers and has commissioned really, fantastic writers that I'm still in touch with today. But it also has it's trying to do something on a blockchain. And I'm just like, oh, I still don't get it, to my editor. Anyway, so in the book version of that essay at the end, because how it happened is that I went to see the boardwalk prototypes for the first time right before one of my good friends' wedding. And this is like a friend who just that Generation X that still benefited from pre-Reagan era educational intervention, in the sense that they graduated UCLA with no debt. Their undergrad, they were a Latin American studies, labor studies minor, child of Mexican Irish progressives. They had Chicano muralists as in their family, and so it was her wedding, and she was somebody who was my roommate. Went to the WTO in Seattle, battle in Seattle. Probably put Eduardo Galeano's works in my hands. We went to Cuba together, and so just kind of setting the portrait of this person getting married on the onset of just like, oh man, you guys have no idea, like the boardwalk prototypes, they're terrible. This is me at the wedding, right? And so, but also needing to kind of narrate just like the creative ecosystem that we were a part of in the 90s, and how that sort of flashes in this sort of wedding situation, but also kind of cursed by the fact of just like, and we fucked up because we got worse than Bush Jr. So in a sense, for me, I think that was as nostalgic as it got. I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong. And in terms of loss and anticipatory loss and grieving, I think that becomes the way into interrogating nostalgia. And why do some surrender to it and others sort of resist its seduction? I don't know if that's a satisfying response.
Thank you.
I think we should go next door and have a party.
All right.